Hey everyone, this is Alex from wornoffkeys.com, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create your own commands within your Spigot plugins. Now, before we start, I want to quickly mention that I'll be creating my own server live here on YouTube pretty soon. So if you're interested in that, check out blockblast.net for more information. So in the previous video, we had this very simple thing where we're registering our own event listener, and within here, we have our main plugin, and I'm looking to create a static instance of this plugin because from time to time, we do need an instance of a Java plugin, and so we need an instance of this class. So I can go ahead and say private static my first plugin, and we'll call this instance. And then under on enable, I can say instance equals this. And then we can create a static getter to get this. So public static my first plugin get instance, and we can simply just return instance. So we'll use this later on in the video. And next we want to go into our plugin YML, and by default, this is how you're going to register all of your commands. So within here, we can add in commands, and then here we can list all of our individual commands. So in this video, I'll be making a heal and a feed command to heal our players' health and to fill all of their hunger. So let's say heal. And if I use control space, we see 5 different options. We have a description, aliases, usage, permissions, and permission messages. So under description, I can say heals your player. I then have aliases. So if I wanted H to be a shortcut for this, we can do that. I can then say usage is /heal. And for now, we're not going to have any permissions, but you can go ahead and add them if you want. And this is our command right here. So now we need a way to actually register this. Within our main folder, I'm going to go ahead and make a new package, and I'll call this commands. And this is where all of our commands can live. And I'm going to make a new Java class, and I'm going to call this heal. So this class is going to implement command executor. So we can say implements command executor. And it automatically is going to give us an error. If we hover over this, we can click on implement method and then click on OK. And it's going to generate this method for us. Now, returning true or returning false does different things. Returning true essentially means the command worked okay. And returning false is going to send the usage string to the user. So returning false should be used whenever the user did not use the command correctly. I like to always return true. That way there's no error message whenever the command is used correctly. So the first thing we have to do is take a look at this command sender right here, which could be the console, but also could be a player. So because this is a heal command, we want to assume that this is going to be a player, but we can't always be sure of that. So I could say if not command sender is an instance of player, we can go ahead and import that. We can return true, which will avoid all the error messages when it comes to the usage, and then we can send our own custom message. Now, before we actually send this message, I find sending messages in the default bucket API slightly annoying. For example, if I say command sender.send message, I cannot color it by default. So this message here would literally say and see here. If I wanted to color it, I have to use chatcolor.translate alternate color codes, pass in the and symbol, and then pass in my string here. And then also pass in the color codes, of course. I find this really annoying just to send a colored message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my main file. I'm going to make a new Java class, and I'm going to call this MSG, short for message. And within here, I'm going to create 2 static methods. So we could say public static void send. 2 parameters here. First is the command sender, which I will simply call sender. The second one will be string, which I'll call message. Now the second method is similar. So public static void send, command sender, we'll call this sender, string of message, and then another string of prefix. Within here, I can say sender.send message, chatcolor.translate alternate color codes. We can add in an and then add in prefix plus message. Now this prefix is useful because you can now pass in any default prefix that you want. Now within send, we want to basically just say send, sender, message, and then a default color code, let's say and a. So now under our command here, we can very easily just say message.send command sender, and then pass in some text here. And this will automatically color and a or anything else we want. So we no longer need this giant line here. Now in this case, I'm going to use and see, and we're going to say only players can use this command. So now after this, we're sure that our command sender is an instance of player. So I can say player equals, we'll cast player from command sender. Now that we have access to our player, we can actually heal them. So we can say player.set health, and each individual half heart is a single value. So we can say 20.0 double, and this is going to set them to full health. So now that this command is in my plugin YML, and we actually have our command listener here, it's time to register this in our main plugin. So I can say get command, we can pass in heal, and we can set an executor attached to this command. And this requires a command executor, which is why this is going to implement command executor right here. So going back, setting our executor, we can pass in a new instance of our heal class. And I can go ahead and build the artifacts. And if you watched and followed the previous video, this should build directly into your plugins folder. And now that everything has compiled correctly, I'm going to go ahead and start the server. And now we can go into Minecraft, and I'm going to connect to my local server. I'm going to go ahead and fly into the air here. Then I can go into survival. So we're going to take some damage. And if I do /heal, our health now goes to full health. So this is because of our command here. And also our commands will automatically be imported into our help command. So if we go to the fourth page right here, we see /heal heals your player. So this is the text that we added in. So whatever you add in as your description will show up in the built-in help menu. So let's go back, and now I'm going to show you how you can create a feed command. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how to create your own basic command handler that you can modify to your own needs and will make your life much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my server for now. And I'm going to make a new file within our main package here, and I'm going to call this command base. So this class is going to extend bucket command, and it's also going to implement command executor. And from within here, we're going to want to override the constructor a number of different times to make it easier to actually register these for any use case. So we can say public command base. This is only going to take in the command as a string. I'll come back and actually enter the body of this soon. We also want another overloaded constructor. This will take in the command as well. And also a Boolean called player only. So this command handler will automatically detect if the sender is a player and will send them an error message if they are the console. That way you don't have to manually check that for each command you create. We are then going to have another one here with the command, and this time a number of required arguments. So we can say public command base, string command, int min arguments, int max arguments. Now we only have two more. We can say public command base, string command, int required arguments, and then Boolean player only. And then the final one is going to be command base, string command, int min arguments, int max arguments, and then Boolean player only. So this is going to be the constructor that handles all the logic, and then all the previous constructors are going to call each other to ensure that everything is going to work no matter how little or how much information we need to pass in. So in this first case, we're going to say this command and 0. And this is going to call this constructor right here. Afterwards, we're going to say this command 0 player only. Then we're going to say this command required arguments, which will then call this constructor. Here, we're going to say this command minimum arguments, maximum arguments, and then false for player only. And then here, we're going to say this command required arguments, player only. So now, no matter how many arguments we have as a minimum or maximum, or if it's player only, we always have a constructor we can call to easily register our command. Now, all this logic can be handled within this. And the first thing we want to do is call super and pass in our command. We also want to create a couple private properties on this class. So I can say private list. This will be a list of strings. We'll call this delayed players, and we'll set this equal to null by default. We can also have private int delay, which will equal 0. And this is the delay in seconds in case you have a cooldown on your commands, which will be built in to easily add with this command handler. We can also say private final int min arguments. And because this is final, we don't have to assign a value right here, but we're going to do that soon in the main constructor. And similarly, we're going to create max arguments. So private final int max arguments, then also private final boolean player only. So now we can assign values to all these within this constructor right here. So this dot min arguments equals min arguments. This dot max arguments equals max arguments. And finally, this dot player only equals player only. So now we need to gain access to something called a command map using reflection. And this is a fairly advanced concept if you're new to Java. So go ahead and just follow along. The exact details of what we're about to write aren't super important for the functionality anyways. So I can say public command map, get command map. We can now say if bucket.get plugin manager is an instance of a simple plugin manager. So now that we know that the plugin manager is a simple plugin manager, we can say field equals simple plugin manager dot class dot get declared field, and we'll pass in command map with a lowercase c and an uppercase m. Now from here we can say field dot set accessible true, and then we can return something that is cast to a command map, and that is going to be field dot get bucket dot get plugin manager. Now these things can throw exceptions, so I'm actually going to highlight all of this and wrap this in a try catch, where we're going to try and catch a no such field exception as well as illegal access exception. On either of these, we're simply just going to print this, and then here we're going to return null, because ideally we should have returned something here, and if it didn't, that means either an exception occurred or we're not having an instance of a simple plugin manager, so we're simply just going to return null. Now, after we've set these initial values here, we want to gain access to this command map so we can actually register our command. So I can say command map equals get command map. And if this is not equal to null, so if command map is not equal to null, we can then say command map dot register. We can pass in our command string, and then we can pass in this. So this is actually going to register our command. And scrolling down, we can now handle our delay logic just in case there's cooldowns within your command. So I can say public command base enable delay. And this is going to take in an integer called delay. I can say this dot delay equals delay, and then this dot delayed players equals a new array list. We then want to return this because this could be used as a factory function to easily chain together multiple functions. Now we want the ability to remove delay from a player. So I can say public void remove delay. I can pass in a player here. I can then say this dot delay players dot remove player dot get name. We can now have a public void send usage command. We can then pass in a command sender as an argument, and this is going to send the correct usage for our command to our user. So I'm going to say message.send sender and then get usage, which is something that is part of our command by default, but we are going to override that soon. We're now going to create our own execute method, and this is going to be ran whenever the command is ran. So I can say public boolean execute. We can pass in a command sender as sender. We can pass in string as alias, and then string array for arguments. By default, we just want to return true. And here we're going to do a number of checks. So just making sure that the number of arguments are correct, as well as making sure that it is player only, and also making sure that they are not delayed, just in case there is a cooldown on some of your commands. So the first step is to make sure that the number of arguments is correct. So I can say if arguments.length is less than minimum arguments, or arguments.length is less than max arguments, and max arguments is not equal to -1. So this logic here allows us to pass in -1 to ensure that there is no maximum number of arguments in case you're looking for the user to enter as many words as they want. So if either of these are the case, we can call send usage and pass in our sender, and then we can return true. Again, if we return false, it will show the default send usage message. So we're looking to return true in every case here. That way that's not sent, so we can handle that logic ourselves. Now next, we want to see if the sender is an actual player. So I can say if player only and not sender instance of player. So within here, I can return true to make sure we don't continue with our code execution. And we can also tell the sender that they can only be a player to run the command. So we're going to use the new message class that I created. We can say message.send, sender, and then and only players can use this command. So this way you can pass in true for your player only, and you don't have to worry about the console using it in case you require the player object. So scrolling back down, the next thing we need is to ensure that the user has permission to use the command. So I can say string permission equals get permission. Then I can say if permission is not equal to null and not sender dot has permission. We can then pass in permission. If this is the case, we can return true. And then we can send them a message saying message.send sender and see you do not have permission to use this command. And of course, you can add in your own strings for any of these error messages. In this case, you might want to add in what permission they're missing, but I prefer to do this right here. So that's one of the upsides of following along with this, is that you get a good starting point and then you can customize it further based off of your own needs. So the last thing we need to check is if the user is delayed. So I can say if delayed players is not equal to null, which is null by default, as we see up here, but we assign this to a new array right down here under enable delay, where we're assigning a delay, and we're also assigning this to a new array list. So this is only not null if we've already enabled a delay. So if delayed players is not equal to null, and sender is an instance of player. So this will ensure we're only going to delay players, because obviously we don't want to delay the console. So now we're going to cast sender to a player. So I can say player equals cast of player sender. So now we have access to the player, and we can say if delayed players dot contains player dot get name. Now within here, we know that the player has used the command too frequently, so we can simply just return true. But then above this, we want to tell them why they can't use the command. So I can say message.send to player and see, please wait before using this command again. And obviously you can make this a more advanced message. This is just a simple example that I prefer to use. Now after this if statement, we know that they have not been delayed, but now we want to delay this player. So we can say delayed players.add player.getName, and then we want to schedule a task for the number of seconds to delay. So I can say bucket.getScheduler.schedule sync delayed task. We now have to pass in our plugin, which is why we created the getInstance method earlier. So I can say myFirstPlugin.getInstance, and then we can pass in our own Lambda function here. And within here is a logic that should be ran after our scheduled task is delayed. So I can simply say delayed players.remove player.getName, and then we have to specify how long we want this task to be delayed for. So after our function, I can say 20L because this expects a long, and there's 20 ticks within a second. So I'm going to say 20L times delay, which is the number of seconds that we provided for the specific command. So essentially, if they are delayed, we're going to tell them to slow down, but if they're not, we're going to continue on and add them to the delayed players list. And then after the delay, we're going to remove them from that player list. Now outside of here, we can then actually run the command. So we can say if not on command, we can pass in our sender and our arguments. We can then say send usage and pass in our sender. And we're getting an error here because we're not supposed to use just on command with these two arguments, but we have more overloading to do within this class. There's only a couple more steps. The next is to create the proper on command handler. I'm going to say public boolean on command. We can pass in a command sender, known as sender, a command, known as command, a string called alias, and then a string array for arguments. Now below this, we're looking to create our own abstract method for on command. Because in the earlier example I showed you at the start of the video, we're able to basically create a new instance of our command base and pass in our own function to handle that. So to do that, we have to have an abstract method. And to do that, we have to make our entire class abstract. So we go to the top, we can say public abstract class. So now we can create that method, public abstract boolean. We'll call this on command. And we only want two parameters here. We want a command sender called sender, and then a string array known as arguments. Now we also want one more abstract method. So I can say public abstract string get usage. and this will return the usage for that specific command. So now within the default on command with the proper built-in arguments, which will be ran by default, we want to call this method right here. So I could say this.onCommand, pass in our sender and our arguments. And now our entire thing is done here. Keep in mind that we are not going to register this within plugin YML. This is one of the benefits of getting our own command map here, is that we don't have to do anything in our plugin YML. I'll keep this heal here just as an example, but we're going to create a new command for feed. So I'm going to make a new Java class called feed, and then this is going to simply have a constructor. And within here, I can say new command base. I'll pass in the arguments here in the constructor in a few seconds, but within here, I can say @override public boolean on command sender as sender, and then a string array for arguments. For now, I'm just going to return true. And now we need to use the get usage, which also was an abstract method, so we have to override it as well. So @override public string get usage, and here we can just return a simple string of /feed. So this string will be sent to users who do not use the command correctly. So now what do we add within here? We have a number of options. The start is going to be the actual name of the command, in this case feed. We can also pass in player only, which is true. Now, if this had arguments, we can set a minimum number of arguments as well as a maximum number of arguments, let's say 1. If we wanted no max, such as a /say command, we can add in -1, because as we remember, if we go back, we are checking to see if max arguments is not -1. I also just noticed this error right here. We're supposed to return this because this expects a Boolean. So make sure you do that. Going back here, as you can see, we have a number of different useful things. But in this case, we don't need any arguments, so we're just going to say feed, and that player required is true. So now on our on command, we know for sure that our sender is a player and not the console, so we can easily cast that. Player equals a cast of player from sender. And now that we have access to our player, we can say player.setFoodLevel 20. So again, we are not registering this in our plugin YML. The command base will do all of that for us. And we also could apply a cooldown to this. So here I can click on this curly brace and it shows the ending one here. Before the semicolon, I can do a dot and we see all the methods we can use here. In this case, we can say enable delay. We can pass in 2 for 2 seconds, and this will automatically handle the delay for all players behind the scenes. So now we're almost ready. As you can tell, we're making the new command within this constructor. So therefore we have to actually call this for this command to be ran. In our main plugin, we can now say new feed, and this will automatically register the command because it's going to make a new instance of this class, therefore run this code, and therefore register the command. So we can go ahead and build, and this will automatically be built into the plugins folder for my test server if you followed one of the previous videos. So going back into my test server console, I can go ahead and start up the server, and then we can try out the plugin. So I've logged into my server and I've done some running around. So we've now lost some hunger. And if I do /, we now see the feed command is right there. So if I run this, we now see that we are full hunger. And so our command has automatically ran, even though we did not add it into our plugin YML. So this is all the code we need in order to register our own command. Let's go ahead and try out the delay system. So if I do /feed, and I do /feed again, it's going to say, please wait before using this command again. Now, when it doesn't say anything, that means it's actually working because we did not send a confirmation message. Now, one last thing we might want to add is a confirmation message just so the user know it works. So we can say message.send player, you have been fed. And we now have a working feed and heal command.